like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind.
Visit StogieGeeks.com/debonair for a list of retailers who carry Debonair cigars. Buy some today and get a little more Debonair. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stogie Geek Show. This is our Debonair Ideal segment. I do want to remind everyone to check out the Ultra Premium line from Mr. Phil Zangi. That's what is the full name of that? It's the
Indian Motorcycle
Motorcycle Ultra Premium. Thank you. One of my most anticipated cigars. I can't wait to smoke them. Can't wait. He told us about them before he was public with them. He broke the news here on Stogie Geeks. He was coming out with them. So we're very excited about that particular cigar line.
Yeah, and we'll have some pictures up of Phil Zangi's Debonair booth.
It was cool. He had a motorcycle. He had the whole carriage with the barrels on it and everything.
Yep, and it was kind of one half of the booth was Debonair. The other half was Indian Motorcycle, and that Indian Motorcycle, it had that retro feel with that bike. I mean, the bike was, I have some really close-up pictures of the bike, and Phil had a very good show. He also had he had the Debonair 33rd Degree Maduros out there as well, which is his new, the A size he's been talking about for probably a year and a half, so that should be hit soon.
Awesome. So, Will, let's talk about the being Debonair at IPCPR.
Yeah.
IPCPR. Jesus.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to get that wrong at some point.
IPCPR, yeah. So, folks know every year the cigar industry, they have a trade show and convention where the whole industry gets together. And IPCPR is a retail organization, first and foremost. So they represent the retailers. The interests of the cigar retailers, particularly on the brick and mortar side. There is an organization called the CAA, which represents the manufacturers. That's the Cigar Association of America. And then the consumers, we have the Cigar Rights of America. So they're kind of like three pillars. But so as IPCPR, it's a big deal because at this show, they provide a combination of education. And then there's a 3.5-day trade show where the manufacturers come in. And there's 3 days of sales where they offer a combination of show specials with mostly, in a lot of cases, showcasing new product. And they put some elaborate booths that are in place. So when you go there, it's like a cigar Disney World. What I'll say about this is the bad news, it's a show for the retailers. It's not an expo for the consumers. We really do lack an expo for the consumers.
Yeah, we do.
And there's been talk about opening up a consumer day for the IPCPR. I'm dead set against it. It's not the place to mix consumers in there because it is a sales show. And that becomes where a lot of the etiquette comes into play because there's really the people who are at the show are one, retailers, two, manufacturers, and then how do I get to go? I'm media. So there's media credentials that are issued.
And they've been stingy in the past with media credentials. I think that's progressed to a pretty good point up till now, right?
I would say it's been difficulty. There's been on the opposite now. Now they're saying it's a little too easy to get into because what happens is there's been cases, and I didn't see it this year as much as last year, where guys who basically didn't even have any content were getting into the show. And that's where it becomes a problem. Now, media is technically not allowed to ask for samples. We're not allowed to go to a booth saying, hey, can I have a sample to review? I think I'm going to say this on the air, and I'm probably going to get crucified. It's archaic that we can't do that. I understand why it was put in place because there were problem people, but I've talked to other people in genres. The fact that retailers can ask for samples and I can't is a problem, but the etiquette is we have to respect that rule. It's IPCPR's show. We're still their guests. So that's...
Well, yeah, and, the focus of the show is for the retailers. It's for that business transaction to take place. And I feel like, over time they felt like media could potentially interfere with that, which is to a certain extent understandable, right? Because the goal of the show is to allow cigars to be bought by retailers, essentially. So you have to be careful when you allow media into that because we lack any, a lot of the other events we lack where media can be there to get the news about cigar manufacturers releasing cigars. That this is the show where we do that, and the two have to converge and live side by side.
Yeah. Now, are there consumers on the floor? Yes. And typically they get on the floor two ways. They go to help a retailer or they go to help a manufacturer. Now, I think as long as I'm not going to speak for what the rule is specifically, but if someone's there helping a retailer do purchasing, making orders and stuff like that, doing the orders, that's okay. I've not seen that be, and I think it's known that some people have done that. Same with if someone goes to volunteer to help a manufacturer in the booth where they need basically staff and they want to go to the show. I've seen that happen as well. The problem becomes is when those consumers are set out on their own, and that's where some of because they haven't been through a trade show and they don't understand that it is a trade show. That's where the problems have happened in the past. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword. The cigar industry doesn't have a lot of money, and it is work, and you do need people to help carry out this work. But it's when folks start kind of going out on their own where it becomes more of a problem.
And it's interesting. I can remember when since I've been in cigar media and I get to know manufacturers and retailers, and if they would start to talk about, well, hey, you can just come to the show and help us out. And I'm like, no, like I'm media. I can only go as media. I can't go as like the person helping you because it's not a good mixture of things.
Yeah, and it does become a problem with that a lot where, that's exactly the case. Now, there are times you do need support. We do need people to help us with media, in terms of we're going to need, we talked about some of the stuff we may do next year. We're going to need some of the production support there if we want to start doing
we're going to need proper media coverage, and there's we have to abide by all the rules of IPCPR and respect the manufacturers and retailers essentially.
Yeah, where the media's gotten into trouble, and there's this perception that there's a war with internet media and IPCPR, and I'm going to say it's a perception, and the reason is I've covered 6 shows, and I've had no run-ins with the IPCPR. I've had some disputes with them, or not disputes. I've had a couple of issues. I've had a talk.
Yeah, you've had disagreements and you work through it. That's fine.
Or there was an issue, here or there where, access to something. But I've always done it behind closed doors. Now, to respect Barry, some of the older media guys decided, some of these older bloggers who were there, they decided when they weren't happy with something, instead of trying to work it out behind closed doors, they went and started shooting off comments,
blog posts and Twitter tweets and all that stuff.
And that's what's hurt us. And it's been isolated cases. This has not been, like I said, the last 2 years I've seen things go real smooth with the media.
Yeah, I have too. I've seen that situation almost be to the point where it's getting to be non-existent, where IPCPR and media have a mutual respect now that I think I don't see a lot of those posts anymore.
But what happens too is, this is for anyone who's in the industry listening or not. If you think this is a thing to go to and get cigars, you're really wrong on IPCPR. And it's a lot of work for a lot of us, okay? For the people who are serious. It is work from when you hit the floor to when you're done. And it's not, it's work. So there's costs that we have to do this. We have to pay travel to go there. This comes out of our budgets to go there. It's time. When you're doing work, that translates in my work. If I didn't do this, I'd have to pay someone to do this. So it's time. So that it's a very costly proposition. And I think a lot of media sites have seen that, they go there. If they're serious about covering it, they got to make the investment to do it. And I think we've been successful at that. I'm going to pat ourselves on the back because we've been willing to make that investment for the last 6 years.
Yeah, we have a great interview that I just posted today of the Davidoff CEO.
Yeah, I tell you what, Paul did a great job at actually kind of editing some of that stuff. That was a bucket list interview. Interviewed Hans Christian Hosgaard in my book. I hope folks are going to enjoy that. We'll have that published out.
It's published now. It's on YouTube. I don't think it's fully public yet, but it's in our feeds. Yeah,
we'll have them on each of the sites. And Davidoff's a company that we've talked a lot about, and I talk a lot about Davidoff, why they've been so successful over the last 4 years. And I really trace it back to Hans Christian, who came in with a vision 4 years ago, and we talk a lot about that vision in there. But again, that was a case where we had to go through the proper channels to get an interview like that. You can't just show up at a booth saying, "I want to interview the CEO of Davidoff." You have to kind of work through, and I think it's very important when you're dealing with any company, deal with the chain of command. And if the chain of command, if it's a good company, they'll have good people under them, and you'll get to the people there. So I don't think anyone else has an interview with Hans Christian. Maybe, so I think I should say Cigar Dave does have an interview with Hans Christian, and I'm honored that if we're in there with Cigar Dave, we did something right.
Now, Will, let's talk to me a little bit about smoking rules, regulations, and laws as it pertain to New Orleans and the venue where they held IPCPR this year, because that's something you also have to respect.
Yeah. IPCPR deserves a lot of credit. They get beat up on a lot of things. They went into an impossible situation in New Orleans with some of these smoking bans. And I'll say this, the smoking situation wasn't ideal. I had a couple conversations with Stogie Santa because a lot of times smoking on the show floor was not a problem. But Stogie Santa couldn't smoke while he was setting up the booth.
Really?
Yeah. So people had to respect that, and I didn't. I saw some people put posts, "Hey, I'm smoking on the floor illegally." I really didn't like that. Again, it's the convention center rules. I'm sure if IPCPR could have done it, they would have made it like that. The bigger problem was smoking after hours, but a lot of people, for the most part, there were a lot of places rented out as private venues, and that's how they got around the rules with that. I was at a party, an Espinosa Cigar Dojo party, where they rented out Hemingway's. I was also at the Underground Cigar Shops party, where they did the same thing. Davidoff had a smoking venue we were able to go to for that party. So it was a little tougher if you weren't at these private events because there weren't a lot of indoor choices. So that was a little more challenging, but it was not as bad as I thought it would be. So I think IPCPR did a good job with that. I didn't hear of any real problems. People couldn't smoke in the casino, which is Harrah's Casino. That was probably the only issue I heard where people were grumbling a lot.
Right. So do you think IPCPR will be back in New Orleans, or?
The plan is, what I've been told is, there's been talk of it's 3 to 5 years. I've been told it's at least 3 years in Las Vegas. Politically, I don't know if IPCPR will go back to New Orleans unless something changes with the smoking ban.
Right.
So that was a pretty comprehensive. So if you give, this is an event that's given a lot of money to the city, I think it would send the wrong message. I mean, even though I think New Orleans did a very good job at hosting this show, and I'll say this, all the support, the hotel people, the cab drivers, they were so welcoming, and it was one of the more welcoming cities I've been into for a cigar convention. I'd hate to see them lose it, because they did do a good job with that, but I don't think it's going to be back there anytime soon.
Yep. Excellent. Well, with that, we will take a short break and come back. We're going to talk about our Stogies of the week for this week, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.